This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today we're going to talk about a little something which around peacefulness, around keeping our peace, and then what conditions that maybe we've put on our peacefulness. Now, you'll often hear me talk about conditional love, conditional happiness, conditional self-worth, conditional confidence. What I'm pointing at with all of these things are the conditions that we have made up in our mind that have to line up in order for us to feel a particular way, or in order for us to think that we are seen in a particular light. And so when it comes to peacefulness, this is the same thing for a lot of us. Now, for someone like myself, so we look at, once again, just lean into the Enneagram as a model for a second. There is a peacemaker in there, and almost should be called the peacekeeper. Whereas that's probably the typology that I lean into the most. For me, the challenger. So it's like the opposite of peace was actual peacefulness for me. So if there was peacefulness, I was actually quite anxious about that, because what that meant is that something's going to go wrong soon. If it's too quiet, it's like having toddlers or puppies. It's like which actually I do have a dog around here in the studio sniffing around at the moment. So it's like if he's quiet, I look around, right? And that's how I constantly felt. I felt if things were going well, I fucking knew what was going to happen next. And what I would almost do each time was to fucking sabotage my situation, because that way that I could almost be in control of the fuck up, rather than the fuck up coming when I didn't see it, and then feel silly, then feel like I was exposed, then feel vulnerable, feel weak, etc. So it's a really interesting thing. Now that peacefulness was like, I needed friction. I needed there to be some sort of difficulty, some sort of trouble, some sort of struggle for me to feel at peace. If I didn't have that, then I didn't feel at peace, which is quite an interesting conundrum. Now, the flip side of this is a lot of people who constantly look to seek peace, and often what I'm pointing at today is the external frames of this, right? And so it's like, when this happens, then I'll be at peace. Or it's like, if I keep everyone else, like if I meet everyone else's standards and they're happy, then I'm at peace. I'm safe, right? And then I'm happy. And that these are the lies we tell ourselves. And what's actually occurring is that we're putting our peacefulness onto external situations that are actually out of our control. Because somebody's happiness isn't actually in your control. If it's not in your control, then you are constantly being pulled between, let's call it peace and war, because of somebody else's ability to control what you're putting your conditions on. And so this is when we have to look at the conditions and look internally and go, what are the things internally I can do that I can set my my needs or my desires for peace on? And if that's the case, then we can actually look at it and go, well, maybe it's the ability to say no to things that no longer serve me. Maybe it's the ability to say yes to things that do serve me. Maybe it's making sure that the first thing I do in the morning for 5 minutes is give myself some time, right? And people go, well, if there's kids, you can't always do that. It's like, sure, maybe not, but there's variations of that for each individual person. And so it's not about a global blanket rule for each person here, for all people rather. It's about looking at it from an individual standpoint and going, what are the internal parameters that I can meet in order to maintain peace, rather than relying on constantly changing and evolving external frames, external principles, external references, anything external. Now, we can simply use an amalgamation of both internal and external sort of conditions, but what I'm really pointing at here is that as soon as we hand over these conditions to an external source, we hand over our power to be at peace. And being at peace is a powerful place. If somebody's angry at you and you're at peace, then you're in a position of power, not the person that's basically displaying anger. That's not power. That's a lack of power, you see. And so this is a really, really crucial and also important space and important point to really drill home for us, is that, I remember reading a quote, this comes to mind, the first person to get angry loses, right? And it doesn't mean that anger itself as an emotion is bad. It's not. It's when we identify as anger. When I'm angry now. I am the manifestation of anger. I've lost, because I've lost who I actually am, and in seeing and experiencing my anger and being able to communicate and be at peace in that current moment. So this is where, when we have the awareness to be able to go, well, what does peace look like for me? What has to happen? This is a great question for all of us. What has to happen for me to feel at peace? And what answers come up for you, write them down and start jotting what's external, what's internal. Because we have decided at some point in our development, we decided what had to happen in order for us to meet peace. Now, excuse me, in saying that, that probably happened at a very young age, right? And it probably had a lot to do with our caretakers, coaches, or teachers. The thing about it, though, is that at the age we're at now, whether you're listening to this as 23, 25, 20, 30, 49, doesn't matter, you can change that. It's just depending whether you want to change and if you're willing to go through the process, because it is a process to change. When we start to see these parts of us that we no longer want, we first have to define that we just don't want this anymore. It doesn't serve me anymore. At some point it did. At some point it allowed me to be safe in my own home with my parents, who were a little bit hostile, or maybe one of them was a little bit more of a peacemaker, and they just sort of escaped into their own head and sort of just went along with things, and they were compliant. And so I picked up that because it was just easier at the time. But now as an adult, I get fucking walked over and it makes me really angry, but I just don't show anyone that anger because I don't want to lose. And so we start to see all these frames showing up, and it's about understanding that and seeing it, accepting it. That's fucking the biggest thing. When we see these parts of us that we no longer like, it's like, how do I get rid of this fucking thing? It's like, stop shaming it. Accept it. Accept it as a part of your personality for it served you for quite some time. Right, it's like an employee at your work that's been there for years and they're out of date. It's time for them to move on, but you haven't really given them the acknowledgement they deserve for being there for so long. And they've done a lot of good for you. Acknowledge them, thank them, and then move on. Hire someone new and train them up. And that's the same thing as our personality skills. When we start to recognize that when we've put so much weight on external conditions for our peacefulness, we can start to recognize when they come up again, thank them, accept that, and start to really identify new patterns that are going to serve us more moving forward. And this is the constant about life. This is the change about life, is that we have to look at, if we're constantly leaning into external factors for our peacefulness, then we're constantly going to be getting pulled left, right, or wherever we're going, because our peace is based on things that are out of our control. Hear that, out of our control, which means we are out of control. When we can really step back and really practice, and it is a practice, it's not just a decision, it's deciding to practice, leaning onto things that are internal, and someone goes, this person thinks this of you, and when you no longer start defending yourself and you're like, okay, and you let that be, it's like, I'm at peace. I don't need that person to like me. I don't need that person to understand me, right? I don't need anything in that relationship. They can be and do whatever they want to be and do. They're going through their own process. Who am I to think that they need to have this particular opinion of me? Who am I to think that I need all these ducks to line up, all the planets to align in order for me to be at peace? When I'm at peace, I'm actually one of the planets that's aligning for someone else. For the whole picture, where we can step back and really lean onto, I'm at peace when I'm kind to myself. I'm at peace when I'm patient with myself. I'm at peace when I'm able to simply breathe deep into my stomach and release my breath nice and slow. When I'm able to do these things that I'm in control of, then I'm at peace, and then I can deal with the world better, rather than when the world is all lined up in the way that I expect it to be based on my version of reality, then I'll be at peace. It's like, fucking good luck, hey. But that's how we live. That's how so many of us live. We're waiting for everything to line up for us to feel good. I'm just going to fucking wait in the queue, buddy. On that note, team, I'm done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you found this podcast beneficial, it would mean the world to moi if you pass it on to someone else that you think would also find it beneficial. If you haven't already, you know the deal. Jump on Facebook, search Mood Prep Online, join the conversation now. I'd love to see you in there. Otherwise, team, that's it. I am done. Until tomorrow, peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick, and slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
Happiness to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.